What scripts and dialogues do we do? How do we handle objections? Right? Like that's the part where we have to really level up or skill up. And the ones that do are just really going to do a great job and just reap the benefits and really grow a really healthy, profitable business for themselves and their families. The ones that don't, however, their unit per year is going to continue to decrease.
All right, folks, we are back. And I got another great interview for you guys along with this NAR settlement series that we got going. We've had a lot of great people jumping in, helping educate, helping train us, kind of spreading some great knowledge. Here, I've got Fred Sed from California, and I became aware of Fred because he had this dynamite podcast from the Place organization. We've worked with a lot of folks with Place, love Place, and Ben and everything. I didn't tell you, Fred, I used to be an agent up in Bothell. So I was, surrounded by Ben Kinney and his organization.
Oh, nice.
I think they're amazing. And just like Matt, everything they do is big, right? Big. So that's awesome. And I saw, Fred on that podcast, and he did a great job. Like, wow, like he seemed like someone had really thought through some of these scenarios around the new rules from the NAR settlement with regards to buyers, but also with regards to sellers. I hadn't really heard anyone tackling that end of the equation. And I was really impressed with the way Fred kind of presented himself and how he handled some of those really tough objections. So, Fred, thank you so much for agreeing to jumping in here and doing this interview for the audience. Tell us a little bit about, who you are, how'd you get into real estate, and what does your business look like right now?
That's a great question. Well, I'm honored to be here to be able to share some knowledge and learn simultaneously. So my name is Fred Sed. I'm a real estate agent here in Southern California. I've been licensed since 2004, but I've been a full-time agent for the past 16, 17 consecutive years since 2008 till now. I was a solo agent from 2008 to 2013. I was doing like, I don't know, 5 or 6 million in volume, like 8 or 9 deals, 100 in GCI. And then I started building a team in 2014 and 15. And we took that team in 2014 through 2018 from just me to about 8, 9 people, 10 deals to 100 deals, 5 million to 40 million, 100 in GCI to 1 million in GCI. And then fast forward, I met Ben Kinney back in the end of 2018. And we just had a decision at that point before Place existed that I would partner with him and I would take the Fred Sed group, partner with him and the Ben Kinney team, and we would launch Southern California, which is what we did. And fast forward about a year later, myself, Ben, 50, 60 of us, we came together and we created a company called Place years ago, which really inhabits and really supports top producing agents and teams really with infrastructure, operations, systems, HR, legal, everything they need to be able to systematize and scale their business while simultaneously making sure that it's profitable along the way. And one of those things that I do with Place Nation across North America is I'm one of the productivity coaches, and I really lead the company as far as scripts, dialogue, conversion, outbound calls, inbound calls, buyer presentations, seller presentations. And I still sell about 3 homes a month in Southern California. And I run a really successful team in 6 locations that covers San Diego, Orange County, LA, and we'll probably end up at about 250 units and about 200 million in sales this year. So, we are heavily involved in this market. About 55% of our business, so about 105, 108 million this year is going to be buyers, and about 95 million or so is going to be sellers. So we're somewhat evenly balanced, Gustavo. So we're in it. We're in the thick of it in Southern California. We're dealing with everything seller and buyer with the industry changes as we speak. And I personally sell about 2 or 3 homes a month myself. So the reason I would say I'm qualified to talk on this topic is because I'm in this topic live every single day. I'm in it to win it. I'm not perfect, but I can tell you we've been working on this for months and months already, and I feel we're ready for these changes, and I can't wait for them to happen. I just need them to take place. So, because I feel like the ones that are skilled and ready to rock and roll that you and I have talked about are really going to set themselves apart from, unfortunately, the agents that are not prepared and not skilled.
Big time. And I think, and I've always been a fan of, kind of the expansion model, and one of the reasons I'm a fan of that model, and you mentioned a lot of the great ways you guys support it, is because of guys like you, right? Because before, in the traditional, let's call it the traditional team model, a rainmaker, a really good trainer, a really good educator could influence, a team. could influence maybe a couple of people, let's say a massive team, 20 people around them, 30 people around them.
Yeah.
Largest teams in the country are 20, 30 people, like the overwhelming majority of the big teams, right? Very few are even above that. But the expansion model is different, right? The expansion model allows Fred to impact and influence hundreds or even thousands of real estate agents, and you didn't start a brokerage. Like, this isn't like you didn't build an office in Nevada and Washington and Oregon and Northern California and Southern California. Like, the dynamism and the sharing of that really, really high level of skills in a very dynamic way is one of the things that I think always impressed me about the expansion model. I trained a long time with Cody Gibson, who also has that model as well. Nice. Same reason. Yeah. Cody's and the impact that you guys can have on a much larger stage, and not just training, right? Because you guys have skin in the game. This place isn't like MAPS coaching, which I worked a long time with. It's not like a coaching program. No. It's like, hey, we're partners, and I think the model is really innovative, and I love it. So, but Fred, so you've been talking about this for months to a very large audience of agents, right?
Yeah, big time, yeah.
Tell me how has that gone? Because when I talk to my audience, I talk to agents, they usually fall into one of two camps, right? They fall in the kind of head in the sand. This is no big deal. You guys are exaggerating. It's not that. Nothing's going to happen. That's one reaction. And then the other one tends to be the polar opposite of that. Like, oh my God, the sky's falling. No one's going to want to pay us anymore. Why would they, right? Like, half the agents in the industry are going to disappear kind of overnight. So that's what usually people fall into one, for whatever reason, they fall into one of those camps. Yeah. How have you seen your organization react to the NAR settlement? It's been 3 months now, almost 4 months now. What has it been like for you guys in your org?
That's a great question. We're in neither one of those camps. We're in what we call the third camp in your analogy, which is it is a big deal. It is a big deal, and the sky's not falling. Right. So we do take the seriousness of industry changes. Any industry change that we've had over the years, I've done this for 16 years. There's been multiple, right? It's serious and can be significant when you're not prepared. The fact that we are prepared, and anybody watching this has the opportunity to be prepared, you're going to be fine. Right. But don't take this in any light way whatsoever. Take this with the utmost seriousness of what's actually taking place. I think anybody who says it's not a big deal is either really confident in their ability. So to them, it's not a big deal, which I respect. But if you just a blanket statement saying it's not a big deal, I think that's just a bunch of BS, and they're not telling you what they really feel. So take it seriously, but also be really prepared. And what we've been doing, if you want me to go into that, Gustavo, within our team, I mean, in a high level, we've just been focusing on, we know at the end of the day, it's going to come down to knowing what the changes actually are, and then knowing how to communicate and articulate them properly to a consumer, and then being in a position where you have the scripts, skills, and dialogues. I think personally, one of the main reasons this happened was, I don't know if there was a group of agents in Missouri that falsified and said sellers have to pay commissions. Every time I've gone to a listing appointment, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, my commission to be your exclusive listing agent for the services I've talked about today is X, and you have the option to pay a buyer's agent commission if you choose to, but you're not required to do so. And if you want to do it, here's what's being offered on similar listings. Here's what I would recommend if you would like to offer it. So that's been my pitch the whole time when I've done a listing appointment. And I've personally taken and closed over 250 listings myself since 2015 and 16. So a decent amount. And that's been my pitch when I've personally taken listings. I've never said you have to pay a buyer's agent. It's not 100% required.
Yeah. This is the standard. This is the standard commission, Mr. Seller. So nothing, you can't do anything about it. That's the challenge, man. That it's never, at least California, I believe, is one of the most litigious states in the nation when it comes to real estate. And we've had to always be careful what we say. And thank God I've always ran a really compliant-based business in what I do, because I want to be here long term. But what we say matters. That's why moving forward, it's even more important that we understand what to say, how to articulate, what scripts and dialogues do we do, how do we handle objections. Right? Like, that's the part where we have to really level up or skill up. And the ones that do are just really going to do a great job and just reap the benefits and really grow a really healthy, profitable business for themselves and their families. The ones that don't, however, their unit per year is going to continue to decrease.
right?
100%. I agree with that. And I heard a startling statistic, earlier this year, which I think is correct. This was from one of the EXP executives.
Yeah.
67% of licensed agents last year closed zero transactions. Okay,
Oh my goodness. That's
67% of agents,
crazy.
which actually doesn't surprise me. It's not I thought it was
Yeah.
50%, but 67, 23 was hard. So maybe it did creep up to 67, right? It's not that crazy for me to see that number. So a lot of agents are already kind of in that camp, like they're
Yep.
not even sure what to do just in a more challenging market. Let alone this is before the NARs anything about NAR
Yeah.
impacted anyone, right? So I agree with you, and Fred, I like the way you framed it. That this is another thing coming to disrupt the industry. You've been around the block. You've been around since 2004. Been an agent since then.
Yeah.
In 2004, it was the internet. Internet's going to destroy the industry. Internet. Oh my goodness. What do you mean our listings are going on the web? Oh, this is the end of real estate. Why would people use a real estate agent if the listings are online? It's the end, right? Zillow's going to kill the industry. Redfin's going to kill the industry. The iPhone's going to kill the industry. So you've been around some of these changes, right? Some of these disruptions. Call that disruptions. Some of them have been technology based. This one happens to be regulation based, right?
Yep.
But with challenges, you've been through this. Are you seeing the opportunity? I'm going to phrase it that way. What is the opportunity?
Yeah.
Because again, it is a challenge. I'm not going to lie. You're right. It is a big deal. We have to adapt or die. For the people that have been around the industry a while, this is not the first time we see. Like I don't want to exaggerate and call it an existential threat, but it's a disruption, right? You can either adapt or kind of go by the wayside. So for the agents that are opportunity focused, Fred, what's the opportunity with these changes coming down the line?
It's a really good question. And when I think of opportunity, I think about going back to the ones that are skilled. Here's what I see. I do believe there will be less agents in the industry that actually sell. So your hypothetical statistic of 67%, and the next 18 months could be 70 to 75 that sell zero. And I do believe realistic. The ones that are I've thought this for a while, and if anybody watching that takes offense to it, I apologize, but I believe it's the truth. I believe in the real estate industry as real estate professionals, we have a low class, a middle class, and a high class, just like income. And I know over the years, because of inflation, we've all said, oh, middle class is eroding, right? We've all heard that saying. I feel the middle class of agents are eroding. What I mean by that is low class of agents, nothing against them, but they're just doing a couple deals a year and they might be okay with that, which is fine. Middle class is solo.
Side gig. Yeah.
Solo agents are doing 5, 10, 15 deals a year, but they're solo. They're paying their bills. They're doing what they got to do. And then high class is really, really, really high producing solo agents with a small team or large teams like ours. And we're just taking more and more of the market share. I feel as a result of this, the middle class of agents is going to continue to erode, that those solo agents doing 10, 15, 20 deals a year, whatever it is, they're going to not do as many deals and go do 4, 5, 6 or get a part-time job or figure it out, or they'll partner with high producing teams like us that basically take advantage and get a lot of the market share because of our infrastructure. So I feel that's one of the opportunities for us that are high producing agents and people that want to have power in partnerships, that don't want to have a business where they're getting kicked out of the market. Industry changes are forcing them not to be able to scale their businesses. But at the end of the day, with that said, that's business, but them as an active person selling homes. The opportunity is, if you can be skilled and dialogued in what you do, you won't have a problem getting sellers to sign agreements with you. And hopefully, if you're skilled enough, you can coach a seller, depending on the market, depending on the house, that it might be beneficial if they offered a buyer's agent a commission to allow more buyers to come and more agents to be incentivized to bring them a qualified buyer. And more importantly, I believe the skills are really going to happen more, I think, on the buy side initially, and getting buyers to understand what a buyer rep agreement is and their market in their state, and then getting a buyer to be able to say, hey, listen, you're going to buy this $1 million property. Hey, I know I'm asking for a 3% commission, which is $30,000, by the way, for you to pay me, right? But here's why I'm worth that kind of money, because of what I can do for you to find a home on market, off market, get you credits from a seller, renegotiate appraisal gaps, get you credits towards repairs, etc., etc. Like putting yourself in a position where you actually really believe in your value and being able to articulate that's really the opportunity.
Yeah, I think right. And I love the phrase you said at the end. you've got to believe in the value first, right? And I think a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
agents are struggling with that. I
Yep.
think that's probably the biggest issue because you have I'll be honest, my first 100 deals, probably 70, 80% with buyers.
Mm,
I mostly work with buyers. How
yeah.
many of them, did I have a conversation, like a proper buyer agency agreement that outlined, because all of them signed buyer agency agreements, but they were like the ones you kind of slipped in with the first offer. You know what? We'll get it signed when when we submit the first offer. It wasn't. I'll be honest. It wasn't that strict with it, and it certainly didn't outline how much I expected to be paid. Right.
Yeah.
So and I know a lot of agents out there. Don't lie, guys. It's the same. That's how you've used if you even used them, that's how you probably use your buyer agency agreement.
Yeah.
That avoidance of it was really an absence of value. You avoided the value conversation. So I think this is a
Yeah.
good segue, Fred, into that first scenario, which I think has a lot of people, concerned, stressed about it, anxious about it, because for a long time, and I don't think this is a good thing, a long time, buyer agents didn't have to have that value conversations. I
Right.
myself, with a lot of buyers, I never had that value conversation. With some
Yeah.
I did, some I just didn't have to, quite frankly, right? So that's going to change. That is I think one of the biggest changes, that we're really going to see from the agent perspective. There's no if and or buts about it, right? We're going to have that value
I
compensation because
agree.
the document says how much you're going to pay me. And if the seller doesn't offer anything, how much is going to come from your pocket? So that conversation is awkward and strange and anxiety inducing. If there's an absence of value, I don't want to have that conversation if there's an absence of
Right.
value. If there's value associated with it, that's just another checkbox. Like, of course, this is going to cost me something, right? Because I'm getting something amazing in return. How are you tackling that first scenario, the buyer agency agreement? Which I know California is a little bit different, but in other places it's not required. It will be
Yeah.
soon, and it's
Yeah.
going to be really strict. It'll be like a bucket of cold water for some of these agents. Holy cow! It's all going to come in at once. How are
Right.
you guys tackling that? And what's the dialogue? What's the scenario that you guys are focused on?
Yeah. It's a great question. Number one, we have to make sure we're doing buyer consultations. That's first and foremost. So all the lead generation you do from any source, open house, sphere, friend, family, online, cold calling, has to lead to a buyer consultation. In that buyer consultation, we have to be able to articulate value. We start by doing this by understanding moving forward, just like we sign a listing agreement, we call that a seller listing taken or an agreement signed, right? We have to look at buyers as a buyer listing taken and a buyer agreement signed. It's the same concept because eventually, if all buyers are supposed to sign buyer rep agreements, and the vast majority are probably going to be exclusive based, and if you sign that buyer in that market, nobody else can touch that buyer or work with them for the next 4, 5, 6 months or during the term of that agreement, just like a seller agreement. So we have to, number one, acknowledge buyer listings taken. Number two, we have to do buyer consultations and have an actual presentation that we do that's professional, that articulates value. And then at the end of it, you have the buyer rep agreement ready to go. And you got to know the buyer rep agreement in your state and in your market and be able to let them know, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, at the end of the day, this agreement clearly states that if a seller is not willing to pay a compensation whatsoever, and you want that property, you will be on the hook to pay me this compensation. Like, it's very direct and clear. But Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I want you to know, over the last 100 buyer transactions my team and I've done in the past 12 months, 99 of them, actually the compensation came from the seller, and only one of them did the buyer actually have to pay a commission, or whatever those numbers are for you. I'm giving you an analogy, but
I
when
love
you
it.
can come from that perspective, and I know my team, for example, all of our buyer transactions, I know in the past 90 days, as these changes are starting to come in our market, we're still getting sellers to actually pay us the compensation in our market, even though some of those listings are offering 0% commission right now, offering 1%. So we're still being able to negotiate to get commissions from sellers. So it's one of those things where it's going to come down to skills, value, and what we haven't talked about really is the negotiation skills that would be needed.
Yeah, 100%. And Fred, what if an agent's saying, well, here's an objection, an agent objection, not even a buyer objection, agent objection. But Fred, some of these internet leads, man, it's hard to even get them on the phone. How am I supposed to, get them to sit down with me, do the presentation, and sign a document before we even view a property? Oh my goodness, this is already hard enough as it is. How would you address a concern from an agent, specifically in
Yeah.
the internet lead scenario?
Yeah, I would say, Mr. and Mrs. Agent, let me ask you a question. If you were going to go hire an attorney, is that attorney going to welcome you and they're going to go with you to court in your case tomorrow without an agreement or without a consultation? No.
Absolutely not.
So they're going to
Absolutely
want to
not.
sit with you. They're going to want to provide their services. They're going to have you sign an engagement letter and have a retainer agreement. If anything, they have to pay the attorney a retainer up front, let alone the future cost. Same thing with a CPA. So, Mr. and Mrs. Agent, I want you to know we're in the service-based industry, just like a financial advisor, a CPA, or an attorney. They have engagement letters and agreements and exclusivity agreements in some cases that a consumer has to sign to utilize their services. We provide, if not the same, if not just more important services when we're helping them acquire their most important asset of their financial life. So why are we any different? And I understand it's hard to get a hold of online leads. Obviously, it's speed to lead, right? But at the end of the day, all leads are sometimes hard to get a hold of. Your job is to get a hold of them. Then you have to get them to a buyer consultation. Then you pitch them on your value and your exclusive agreement.
Got it.
So did that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. I love it all the way from it. It's very, very clear. I think that the process is simple. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's definitely simple. Like it is that simple. If you're converting some of these internet leads, if you think you're making progress with an internet lead without having that, without following those steps, I think you're kind of fooling yourself there too, right? You're going to go, hey, I'm working with all these buyers. Not really. How many buyer listings have you taken? Oh, none. Then you're not working with anybody.
Right.
Not really, right? So I think it's easy for agents to kind of fool ourselves a little bit, right? So here's another agent objection, Fred. See what you think about this one. So,
tell me.
Fred, my goodness, how am I going to get them to sign? How am I going to get them to agree to this? They'll just go straight to the listing agent, Fred. How do we stand a chance as buyer agents in this new world?
No, that's a really good thought and doubt and objection. And per my knowledge, and changes are yet to come. In order for a listing agent to work with the buyer as well, they're going to have the buyer sign some sort of an agreement with them as well. So at the end of the day, buyers will have to sign agreements. And what you want to be able to tell the consumer, Mr. and Mrs. Agent, is the objection I like to use, or the handle I like to use. If a client's thinking that, is I would ask the buyer, hey, listen, you believe that buying real estate is a legal transaction? The buyer is going to say, of course it is. I said, great. So what are you buying at, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer? I'm buying at $800,000. Okay. So if I was suing you for $800,000, or you were going to sue me for $800,000, are we going to use the same attorney in court? They say, absolutely not. I say, why?
It's crazy.
They said, because we need our own representation. I said, well, why is real estate any different? You're putting down 20% on this deal, which is $160,000 in cash. And the seller has already been under contract in a seller representative agreement to cover the best interest of that homeowner for months now, and you come along out of nowhere, not knowing who these people are, thinking that listing agent's going to have your full benefit. So I get that you want to go direct. I get these dynamics, but I want you to know that having your own representation, it's not just about costing you 10 or 15 or 20,000 in fees or commissions. Worst case, if that were to happen, it's about somebody protecting your $160,000 in cash and your then $680,000 liability of loan documents you're going to sign, and get you repair credits, and get you closing cost credit, and get you possibly buy down credits, and save you costs on vendors that they may be using.
Right.
So I would just take that kind of angle approach. It's kind of common sense. And if you can tell a story to a consumer, like I did for the attorney, it gets them to think in a different light. And hopefully in those analogies, light bulb clicks in their mind. And then you could have more of a really logical professional conversation. And I think anybody who's watching this as an agent or an ISA or anybody that has those natural assumptions, the consumer is going to say this. They're probably 90% right. The consumer is going to say that. But in order for you to circumvent that and finally break through that limiting belief and assumption and get better at handling it, you're just going to have to make these calls. You got to meet face to face. You got to get rejected. You got to keep pushing forward. And the more time on task you have over time, so time on task over time regarding this topic, the better you're going to be able to articulate like I am today. And the more confident you're going to be in your approach, like I am today.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you, Fred. And that's it. It's about, seeing these things, out in the wild. And the term that you said I love is limiting belief. I think a lot of these objections are rooted in limiting beliefs, right?
I
Like
agree.
how, that's really what a lot of these are, right? So,
Yeah.
but they're real. They're real concerns. They're real objections. They're real beliefs, limiting or not, right? That agents
Hmm.
kind of have to get it out of them. So here's another one, but from the other side of the equation, from the seller side, right?
Okay.
Because, one of the things I learned from that podcast and that conversation is that it is as important, if not more, right, to have this conversation about buyer agency, buyer compensation with the
Yeah.
seller as well, because they're being bombarded. Even the president just said commissions are going down for everybody. Woo, great! We finally did it. So there's a narrative out there. Agree with it or
Mhm.
not? There's a narrative out there that, thank goodness, one guy hopes he gets reelected over it. I'm going to save you a ton of money on agent commissions. So the sellers, I'm assuming, are coming with these beliefs, with this narrative, and they're saying, Fred, high five. We're going to save a ton of money, right? I don't have to pay these buyer agents anymore. What is a good approach? How do you handle that narrative, that dialogue with the seller?
I've had it recently many times on listings that I've taken just in recent weeks. And some of them said, oh, my friend told me about this article. Oh, I heard about this. So I no longer have to pay commissions. I say, you know what? You're right. You actually never had to pay commissions. It's always been an optional thing for you as a homeowner. Now, in this dynamic, what we have to do is when we're going to sit down and talk about your home, the one thing I'm going to bring to the table is I'm going to find similar homes that are available on the market, pending and under contract, and sold in the past 90 days. And let's look at what they've been offering in commission. Let's see if they're incentivizing buyers to bring buyers to the table. I can tell you right now that over 80%, 85% in our market in your city, the homes that sold were accompanied by an individual buyer's agent. So off the bat, when I'm selling my home, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, which I'm selling some homes here and there, I want you to know that I'm offering a commission myself to a buyer's agent to bring me a qualified buyer. Now, the cool part is you actually don't have to pay them anything unless they bring you an offer that you're willing to accept. And the only way you're willing to accept it is the price that they got the buyer to pay and potentially the fee that they're asking in return. And does that make sense for you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? But we'll talk about this at our appointment.
I got it. So you're framing it in a competition kind of way, right? This is
Yeah.
what the market is. If you want to be competitive in this marketplace, this is the right strategy. You want to be competitive, right? Great. You
Right.
don't want to be the worst deal out there, and you don't want to be the person that gets one or two less buyers showing up, right? Okay, excellent. This is the way forward. This is the path, right?
Yeah, and depending on the MLS regulations, but typically a commission is not paid by a seller unless the transaction closes.
Oh yeah.
And in that situation, it's not going to close unless they accepted an offer they were happy with. And when the negotiations inside of the pending or under contract also went well and the deal fulfilled and closed and didn't cancel. So for those reasons, if you could let them know they don't have to pay them immediately, only if they're willing to accept the right price, then in that situation, they're more likely to do it. Like anybody can sell their home and put on the market and offer 3% to a buyer's agent, but until it sells, they don't have to pay the money.
I got it. I love it. I love the way you're laying these things out because,
Yeah.
like we said at the beginning, the way we communicate these things matter. The way we communicate it, right?
100%.
In a professional, clear way, in a logical way. Like you said, what is the story you're telling? What is the logical flow you're trying to lay out? Does it make sense? Is it in the benefit of the seller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they might, left to their own devices, they go, oh, I want to pay less money. Who doesn't want to pay less money?
Who doesn't want to? Yeah, right?
Like what? Like,
I do
okay,
too.
Great.
Yeah,
100%. Right. But if that were the case, Fred, the industry would be dominated by these flat fee MLS agencies. If that were the case, if that were actually the best way to get a property sold for the most amount of money in the least amount of time, it happens to not be the case, right? So there's more to it than that, and I think we can kind of get lost in that, when we get too hooked on the, oh my goodness, that lower commission is too much of a compelling argument. I can't defeat it. You just laid out a great way to have that conversation with a seller, 100%. And Fred, tell me, so you guys have been preparing this for several months. What is, give me a little bit of detail, like for your own team, your organization, maybe for Place as a whole. What does that preparation look like? Has it been like group coaching calls, role plays?
Yeah.
How are you taking this from the idea? Because, organizations like yours have like some of the people that are doing the deep thinking, and they're communicate, and then they got to go turn around and execute at a pretty large scale, even within your own team, at a large scale.
Great question.
How are you helping the team execute on some of these concepts, some of these ideas you've come up with?
So a couple things. Number one, internally here at Place, we have what's called a buyer certification program and a listing certification program. So number one, we coach our agents and our partners nationally and locally to be able to go through what we call our buyer guide and our seller guide and understand what the content of these presentations are, and then be able to take them through a series of processes for us to identify as their team leader potentially that they're certified and ready to present. And number two, as a result of some of these industry changes, we've been revamping our buyer guide and our listing presentation to intertwine some more value so our partners can really be the best in those local markets to be able to articulate value to the buyer and seller. So once we have that dialed in, then on a local level, what I'm doing with my 30 plus people on my team in Southern California is we're actually having them present the buyer consultation to a leader, veteran, or mentor on the team, and then getting a sign up and say, hey, John killed it on that presentation. He is ready to be able to deliver the new presentation to a buyer. Same thing with listing presentations. And in addition to that, we're doing separate buyer broker agreement or buyer representation agreement certifications, where the existing agreement in California, we're saying, hey, do you know how to fill it out? Do you understand it? Can you pitch it? And in 10 minutes on a Zoom call, pretend I'm the buyer and you got to pitch me on the actual agreement. We're also getting them certified on that. Just making sure that our partners are out there really doing the best for the consumer, showing them that we know what we're talking about. And we want to make sure they know how to fill out the agreement. They know what it means. They know how to make sure they get their worth with the value that they're going to provide.
I love it. I love it. Like I said early on, I think a challenge like this, I think a disruption like this is really going to help organizations like Place stand out, right? Because I feel, this is my perception from the industry, from working with a lot of agents. I think the brokerages are a little bit behind on this. I think they're kind of catching up. The training is going to come, right? I think a lot of people are kind of like not really sure what to do. They're waiting for training and information and collateral to come, or they're waiting for the MLS to tell them what to do. I think a lot of people are in kind of that waiting pattern. They're looking for resources. They're searching. That's why we're having this conversation, because people have asked me for more training and more resources. I think you guys have a leg up on that. That's really impressive to see. And I think actually, I'll say this. Well, I think one of the changes that's coming from this disruption is going to be the emergence of these mega teams. I think so, because of the structure you just laid out, right? Right. I think the mega teams are really, really well positioned to provide level up the skills of their agents, the ones that want to. Again, what is it Deming that said, adaptation is optional, survival is not mandatory, right? So the people that want to will be educated, will level up the skills. And I think they're gonna thrive, right? Yeah. And they're gonna set aside some of those limiting beliefs that anyone can have. It's normal, but they're gonna have a way better weapon to do that with. So kudos to you guys. Kudos to Place. I think you guys do an amazing job. Love it. Thank you. And I love having speakers from Place here in the group. You guys really have it together. I think you have a really well-run organization. So, Fred, appreciate you, man. Thank you for making the time. I know you're a busy guy. Really appreciate your time. And it's amazing. If people want to continue the conversation, maybe attend some coaching sessions that you hold, a coaching program, what's the best way to reach out to Fred and get involved and get some more of this goodness?
Yeah, great question. Add me on Facebook. So Fred Sed on Facebook, or follow me on Instagram, which is Fred Sed Group, or you can do Fred Sed Training on Instagram as well and follow us. And my email is fred@fredsedtraining.com. Reach out to me anytime with any questions. And if I can help you, your business in any way, shape, or form, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Fred. And you have open invitation to come back anytime. Anytime you have some cool things to talk about, I'd love to hear about it. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care.